My dad mocked me for being a janitor. At Thanksgiving, he toasted to the kids who made something of themselves, not the one cleaning toilets. I left. Years later, he begged me for a job. I was 22 the first time my father publicly humiliated me for the work I did. My name is Caleb, and back then I was working as a janitor in an office building downtown. It was not exactly the kind of job people brag about at dinner parties, but it was honest work, and I took pride in it. I like the quiet early mornings, the predictable rhythm of the routines, and the simple satisfaction of leaving a place cleaner than I found it. I was not lazy. I was not directionless. I was saving money slowly and carefully planning for something bigger, something no one in my family ever cared enough to ask about. But to my father, my job was nothing more than a punchline. It was the proof he needed that I had failed. My older brother Mason was already working at some financial firm by then, wearing suits every day and flashing his company credit card like it was a badge of honor. My sister Leah had married into money and spent her time building a picture-perfect life on social media. They were the golden children, polished and spotless, exactly the kind of people my father loved to praise in front of company. That Thanksgiving was the first time I understood how invisible I really was in my own family. It was the usual large gathering at my parents' house, turkey in the oven, kids running through the halls, wine being poured too freely, adults laughing louder than they needed to. I had shown up with a homemade pie and a six-pack, just like I always did. And as usual, no one really acknowledged me beyond a distracted, "Hey, Caleb." Dinner was loud and chaotic, the way it always was, with my father holding court at the head of the table like some kind of emperor. He had always loved an audience, and of course, he loved his speeches. Every holiday, he would raise his glass and toast to something: family, health, the good old days. But that year, he went off script. To the kids who made something of themselves, he said, grinning at Mason and Leah, to hard work that actually leads somewhere, and to never ending up cleaning toilets for a living. I remember the pause after he said it. I remember the way everyone chuckled, nervously glanced at me, and then quickly looked away. Mason smirked and clinked his glass against Dad's. Leah pretended not to hear, but her husband let out a snort and muttered something under his breath. I did not say anything. I did not even finish my food. I stood up, quietly, left the pie on the counter, and walked out the front door. Nobody followed me. Nobody called me. Not that night, not the next day. That moment stayed inside me like a shard of glass buried too deep to pull out. It was not just what he said, it was the way he said it. Like I was a disappointment he had to laugh off so he could feel better about himself. Like my life, my choices, and my path were trash to be swept under the rug. But what none of them knew, because they had never bothered to ask, was that the janitor job was never meant to be the whole story. I had been working nights while taking online business courses. I was learning everything I could about commercial real estate, maintenance, building codes, contracts, and zoning laws. Every paycheck I earned from scrubbing toilets and mopping floors went into a savings account I treated like sacred ground. I had a goal. I had a timeline. I had a vision. I was not going to be a janitor forever. I just did not feel the need to broadcast it. Over the years, I showed up to fewer and fewer family gatherings. The invitations started feeling like formalities anyway. Mass texts with no warmth behind them. And I did not mind. I was busy building something real. I bought my first small office building when I was 26. It was a rundown property near the industrial edge of town. Leaky pipes, outdated wiring, and every problem you could imagine. But I fixed it. I cleaned it up myself. I put in new systems, got it up to code, brought in tenants, and within a year I was already seeing a return. It was not glamorous, but it was mine. By the time I was 30, I owned 3 buildings and had just started my own property management company. I had a team, contractors I trusted, a lawyer on retainer, and a portfolio that was growing faster than I had ever imagined. I still dressed simply. I did not post about it. I was not trying to prove anything. But I never forgot that Thanksgiving toast. Not once. It was not until a couple of years later that I saw my father again in person. Not at a family event, not at another holiday dinner. I saw him sitting outside my office building in the rain wearing a wrinkled shirt, and holding a manila folder in his lap like it contained the last scraps of his dignity. At first, I did not recognize him. He had aged badly. His hair was thinner, his posture was hunched. The man who used to fill a room with his voice now looked small. He did not see me approaching. He just kept staring at the glass doors like he was not sure if he should even go inside. When he finally looked up, our eyes met, and the look on his face said everything. He knew. But before I tell you what he wanted, before I explain how it got to that point, you need to understand how deep the rift in our family really ran. You need to understand how my father's ego, his pride, and his need to humiliate and control tore through the years like a slow-burning fuse. Because that Thanksgiving toast was only the beginning, the real fallout came after that one choice, one snub, and one insult at a time, until everything finally came crumbling down. I did not stop speaking to my family completely after that Thanksgiving toast, but something inside me shifted. I became quieter, more guarded. Phone calls felt more like obligations than conversations. I kept them short, polite, and distant. My siblings did not notice. My father certainly did not. And my mother, well, she never challenged him on anything. She had perfected the art of looking away. Over the next couple of years, the pattern only became harder and more obvious. Every family gathering followed the same script. Mason would talk about his latest promotion or his new client bonuses, and Dad would nod with pride, throwing out lines like, "That's how you build a future," or, "Now that's a man with direction." Leah would flash photos of her kids in private school uniforms, and her husband would chime in with stories about ski trips and backyard renovations. They would all talk over one another like they were auditioning for the spotlight. And I would just sit there, sipping water, answering direct questions with as few words as possible, waiting for an excuse to leave. The real breaking point did not come all at once. It started with little things, tiny cutting remarks my father could never seem to stop himself from making. Still mopping floors. "Caleb, you know if you had followed Mason's lead, you'd have a corner office by now. Don't worry, we all bloom in our own way. Some just take longer." He never asked what I was doing with my time. He never asked how my buildings were doing, how my tenants were, or how I had gone from one property to 3. And I never told him. It was not out of pride. It was out of exhaustion. Why share anything with people who only hear what they want to hear? Mom would try to smooth things over, with tight smiles and weak little chuckles. She would offer me extra pie, or ask if I needed leftovers, as if food could make up for being treated like the family footnote. I might have let it slide forever. Honestly, I had been conditioned since I was a teenager to take the jabs, nod, swallow my anger, and move on. But then came Leah's birthday dinner. She was turning 35, and her husband had rented out a private dining room at one of those restaurants, with more adjectives than actual ingredients on the menu. Everyone was dressed to impress. Leah was in a gold-wrapped dress. Mason wore a navy suit. Even Mom and Dad looked polished, like they were preparing for a photo shoot. I wore a clean button-down shirt and slacks. Nothing flashy, just enough to look respectable. I was not interested in pretending. I was not there to perform. I had barely sat down when Dad looked me over and smirked. "Didn't have time to change after work?" he asked, loud enough for the entire table to hear. I gave him a tight smile. "I don't mop floors anymore, Dad." Mason laughed into his wine. "What, you got promoted to head custodian?" I ignored him. I did not want to give them the satisfaction. But Leah had always been sharper than she pretended to be. "So what do you actually do, Caleb?" she asked sweetly, cutting into her steak with surgical precision. "You're always so mysterious. You come and go, you never post anything, you don't show up to half the family stuff." I shrugged. "I've been busy." "Doing what?" Mason pressed. "I mean, it's fine if you're just keeping it simple. Not everyone wants the stress of a real career." And that was when Dad chimed in again, this time lifting his glass. To Caleb, he said, the smirk returning. The most consistent one in the family, still grounded, still humble, still underemployed. Everyone laughed, even Mom, though she looked uncomfortable while doing it. It was like they could not help themselves. Bullying me had become a family tradition. I stood up, not dramatically, just calmly. I looked at each of them in turn, and for the first time in years, I said exactly what I was thinking. You know what's funny? You all talk so much, but none of you ever ask questions you actually want answers to. That shut them up, at least for a moment. I owned 3 commercial properties, I continued. I managed them myself. I built a company from the ground up with no loans, no help, and no handouts. I didn't tell you because I didn't need your approval, and I sure as hell didn't want your advice. I left my napkin on the table and walked out before anyone could speak. No yelling, no dramatics, just quiet, clean detachment. For a week, I did not hear from any of them. Then I got a text from Mom. Maybe don't cause scenes at your sister's dinner. It was supposed to be a celebration. That was all she said. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just another slap wrapped in fake concern. So I stopped replying. I stopped showing up. I skipped the next Thanksgiving completely and went on a weekend trip to the mountains instead. Snow, silence, peace. It was the first holiday I had truly enjoyed in years. But the silence from my family did not last. 6 months later, Mason called me out of the blue. "Hey," he said, sounding unusually stiff. "I was wondering if you could meet for lunch, somewhere quiet." I was suspicious immediately. Mason never wanted anything that did not benefit him. "What's going on?" I asked. "It's about Dad," he said. "He didn't want me to say anything, but he got let go. Company restructuring. He's having trouble finding new work." I blinked. That man had been bragging about his job security since I was a kid. Mason kept talking. "He's struggling, man. Mom's worried. He's not talking to anyone. He just sits around the house all day. He's applied to places, but no bites. It's been months." I could hear the hesitation in Mason's voice, the careful way he was building up to something. "He saw your name on a building downtown," Mason finally said. "One of your tenants mentioned you in passing. He was surprised, and then he asked me if I thought you were hiring." I said nothing. "Look," Mason continued, "I'm not saying you owe him anything, but maybe just talk to him, even if it's not a job, maybe a reference or something. He's proud, okay? But he's scared too. I've never seen him like this." I agreed to meet him not because I felt obligated, but because I wanted to look that man in the eye and see if he would say it. I wanted to see if he could swallow even a fraction of his pride. That was how we ended up back at the start of this story, with my father sitting outside my office building in the rain, holding a folder full of resumes for jobs he never thought he would need. But before I tell you what happened, when I let him in, what he said, and how I responded, you need to know what came before that. Because right after I walked out of Leah's birthday dinner, the real betrayal had not even happened yet. That came 2 weeks later when I got a call from my property manager about a maintenance issue at my newest building. It was an issue that did not make sense. A leaky pipe, a busted lock, a broken HVAC unit, all in 1 week. Things that had just been inspected, things that should not have failed. Then I got a call from my bank asking whether I had authorized a series of refund requests and canceled payments from one of my business accounts. I had not. That led me to check the internal admin software we used for building operations. That led me to see who had logged in remotely. And that led me to one very unexpected email address, an old family email address Dad used to have when he helped Mason set up a small investment site years earlier. Somehow, some way, he had gotten into my business systems. He had accessed enough to sabotage the operations. And when I traced the IP address, there was no mistake. It came from my parents' house. That was when the story really changed. I did not sleep the night I confirmed that the sabotage had come from my parents' house. I just sat there in the dark, staring at my laptop while the pale glow of the screen painted the walls with a cold, sterile light. The email address the IP traced the system logs, it was all right there. My father had not only disrespected me for years, not only belittled every choice I had made, but he had actively tried to damage what I built. At first, I did not want to believe it. I went back and forth with myself. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was Mason. Maybe the IP had been spoofed. Maybe someone else had used the network. I was grabbing at anything that would let me avoid the truth. But deep down, I knew it made too much sense. The timing, the precision, the way everything had hit at once, like dominoes falling. My father did not understand much about modern systems, but he was not stupid. He had once managed an entire department. He had run audits. He had handled accounts. He knew how to interfere with logistics. He had just never used that knowledge against me before. Not until then. I tried to confront it rationally. I took screenshots, I documented the timestamps, I pulled security camera footage from the offices to show who had not been there when the maintenance requests were logged or the accounts were accessed. I built a quiet case, not for a lawsuit, at least not yet, but for myself, so I could confirm I was not imagining things. I needed to know the betrayal was real. But even knowing the facts did not make it hurt any less. I felt hollow for weeks. I went through the motions, nodded through meetings, signed papers without reading them twice. My assistant Leia noticed first. She kept asking if I was okay and offering to take things off my plate, but I just told her I was tired. She did not press. She was good like that. She knew how to give someone space without leaving them alone. The real blow did not come from the sabotage itself. It came when I finally drove to my parents' house and walked in unannounced. Mom was in the kitchen frosting cupcakes like it was any other Tuesday. She blinked at me in surprise and then smiled. "Caleb, sweetie, you didn't say you were stopping by. Want coffee?" "Where's Dad?" I asked flatly. Her smile faded. "He's in the garage. Why?" I did not answer. I just walked past her through the living room, past the old pictures of Mason's graduation and Leah's wedding. There were no pictures of me on the walls. When I opened the garage door, he was sitting at the workbench sorting through a box of old tools, like he was waiting for someone to need him. He looked up startled, and his face stiffened. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. I held up the folder I had brought with me. Inside were printouts of the logs, the traces, and the screenshots. I handed them to him in silence. He took one look and scoffed. "You came all the way here for this?" he asked. I waited. He set the papers down on the bench like they bored him. "So what if I looked into your little business? I thought, maybe if you were serious about growing, you could use some structure. Your systems are a mess, Caleb. You're running it like a janitor." My mouth went dry. "You accessed my accounts. You triggered false work orders. You tried to tank client confidence." He shrugged. "I was testing your setup. You're the one who's always so sensitive." I stared at him, disbelief flooding every part of me. "You really think this is your version of help?" "I think you've spent too long thinking small," he said. "I thought if you saw where the cracks were, you'd wake up and finally let someone with experience help you run things." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so insane, so self-righteous, that laughter was the only thing standing between me and screaming. "You didn't help. You sabotaged. You humiliated me in front of the family, and now you break into my systems and call it help? I built a career from scratch." "Caleb," he snapped. "I know how to run an operation. You just lucked into some property and suddenly think you're a mogul." "Lucked into," I whispered. He stood up, towering over the bench, now his eyes flashing. "You're not special, son. You're just bitter because your brother passed you by. You always have been." I did not respond. I did not argue. I just turned around, walked out of the house, got in my car, and drove away. That was the last time I spoke to my father face to face for almost 2 years. I wish I could say I bounced back quickly. I wish I could say I channeled my rage into fuel and built an empire overnight. But that is not what happened. For the first time since I was 17, I seriously considered quitting. I thought about selling the buildings, walking away, and finding something quieter, smaller, something that would not make me a target in my own family, something that would not make me question every choice I had ever made. But I did not quit. 2 weeks after that confrontation, one of my longest-term tenants, a pediatric clinic, called me personally. The HVAC unit we thought had been damaged during the sabotage had been replaced quickly, because I paid for it without drama or delay. I just got the job done. The clinic director wanted me to know how much she appreciated it. "You're one of the best building owners we've worked with," she told me. "The last guy ignored everything. You're always present. You care." Something about that stuck with me. I cared even when no one else did. Even when my family mocked me, ignored me, and tried to tear me down, I still cared about my work, about my tenants, and about the spaces I was building and maintaining. That meant something. So I poured myself into the business, not with anger, but with intention. I upgraded the security systems. I hired an IT consultant to review every vulnerability. I rebuilt the backend with layered permissions and two-factor authentication. I updated the tenant portal and created new operating procedures for the maintenance teams. I cleaned house from top to bottom. Then I expanded. I bought a fourth property, then a fifth. I opened a co-working space in an abandoned mid-rise. I hired a small team of local contractors full-time and gave them benefits, holiday pay, and real respect. Something most landlords never even considered. I did not just want to grow. I wanted to build something that did not depend on smoke and mirrors. Something real. I started mentoring a few young people too. Mostly people like me. People working night shifts and saving pennies while trying to figure out how to climb. I did not broadcast it, but I made space for them. I answered emails, I took calls. I showed them what I had learned the hard way. Slowly, quietly, the weight started to lift. I stopped checking my family's social media. I stopped comparing my milestones to Mason's vacations or Leah's curated perfect life. I unfollowed them, muted the group chats, and carved out a life that finally made sense to me. The buildings became more than real estate. They became symbols of what I had survived and what I had outgrown. Every lease signed, every tenant retained, every system improved felt like reclaiming a little more of myself. But the past has a way of circling back. And 2 winters later, it did. That morning, I came in early. The sky was gray and soft flurries were falling outside the large glass windows of the downtown office building I had bought 6 months before. The coffee machine sputtered to life in the break room while I reviewed new leasing agreements. Then Leah poked her head into my office. "Hey," she said hesitant. "There's someone outside. He says he's here about a job." I looked up confused. "A walk-in?" She nodded. "But Caleb, it's your father." I froze. Then I stood, walked to the lobby windows, and there he was. Same man, same cold smirk, softened by years of wear. He was holding a folder standing in the snow like he had nowhere else to go. He had returned. But this time, he was not there to gloat. He was there to ask for something, and I had not yet decided whether I was going to give it to him. I did not go out to greet him right away. Instead, I stood behind the tinted glass with my arms crossed, watching my father shift his weight from one foot to the other as snow began to collect on his shoulders. He looked smaller somehow, like someone had let the air out of him. Not just older, diminished. The confident, commanding man who used to make toasts over turkey and belittle me with a smile was now just cold, waiting, hoping. And yet, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, no urge to gloat. Just a strange, heavy stillness, like the silence before a storm you already know is coming. I turned to Leah. "Don't let him in yet." Her eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "Yeah, let him wait a bit." She gave a slow nod and walked off, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. I went back to my office, closed the door, sat behind my desk, and let my mind work. I thought about everything that had led to that moment. The years of snide remarks, the public humiliation, the sabotage he had tried to frame as help. And now there he was, jobless and desperate, standing outside a building I owned, looking for a way back into something he had no hand in building. The irony was almost too perfect. But I was not interested in petty revenge anymore. I wanted something that would last, a message he could not ignore, a lesson he could not twist into pride. So I started planning. The first thing I did was pull up the folder I had labeled contingencies. It was where I kept the documentation from the sabotage, everything I had quietly gathered and filed away after our last encounter. Back then, I had not known whether I would ever need it, but something in me had refused to let it go. Now it felt like a loaded chamber waiting for a trigger. I printed a few choice pages, the IP logs, the system access records, the timestamps. Not everything, just enough to remind him that I had not forgotten. Next, I called my lawyer, Sam. He was sharp, discreet, and had been on retainer since my second building. "Hey," I said, "hypothetical question for you. Let's say someone with a history of hostility toward you shows up looking for work. Someone who previously accessed your business systems without permission. Could you legally hire that person and also use the contact to secure protections in case they ever tried something again?" There was a pause. "Hypothetically," Sam asked. "Hypothetically. You could," he said, "but you'd want an airtight contract. Boundaries and NDA, limited access, monitoring. It might even be worth creating a role just for that. Nothing essential, but enough to keep them close." I nodded even though he could not see me. "Got it. Thanks, Sam." "Caleb," he added, his voice lower, "are you sure about this?" "No," I said, "but I'm not planning to offer him a job. I'm planning to offer him a mirror." After the call, I reached out to Leia. "Bring him in." She hesitated. "Want me to sit in?" "No, this one's mine." I stood as the door opened and my father stepped inside. He looked around, taking in the office, the dark wood paneling, the subtle modern furniture, the framed certificate on the wall, and the registration for my LLC. His eyes lingered there a moment longer than necessary. Then our eyes met. "Caleb," he said, his voice scratchy. "Thanks for seeing me." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Sit." He did. A long pause stretched between us, heavy with everything unspoken. He cleared his throat. "I know this is unexpected, but I figured I'd try. Things have been hard lately." I said nothing. He shifted in his chair. "I know I haven't always been the most supportive, but I'm looking for something stable now. I thought maybe if you had something." I let the silence stretch until it bordered on cruel. Then I opened the folder and slid it across the desk. He looked at it, then back at me. "I remember this," he said softly. "So you kept it?" I nodded. "I keep a lot of things." He did not open the folder. He just rested his hands on top of it. "I was wrong," he admitted, "about a lot. I wanted to believe you were still figuring things out. I wanted to believe I still had time to teach you something. But I see now that you built this without me. You don't need my help." "No," I said calmly. "I don't." He swallowed hard. "But you came here anyway," I added. He nodded. "I don't have anything open that fits your background," I continued. "And frankly, you're a liability. I can't risk another breach." His face tightened. "But I said I can offer you something." His eyes lifted. "I have a new division. Property inspections. Nothing glamorous, just routine checks. Plumbing, HVAC, structural walkthroughs, fieldwork, clipboards, reports, entry-level stuff. Contract only. No admin access, no systems, no keys." His face fell just slightly. "Sound beneath you?" I asked. He shook his head slowly. "No, not anymore." I leaned forward. "If I bring you on, it's with full monitoring, weekly check-ins, random reviews. Any deviation from the route, any missed appointment, and you're out." He nodded again, smaller this time. "And you sign a statement acknowledging your past interference and agreeing to permanently stop all access attempts or communications related to my internal systems." I pulled out the agreement Sam had prepared and slid it over. My father took it, read a few lines, then looked up. "You already had this ready. I knew you'd come eventually," I said. "I just didn't know when." He looked down again and signed. When he handed it back to me, I did not smile. I did not shake his hand. I simply stood. "Laya will give you your schedule. You start Monday." He rose too, searching my face for something. Gratitude, maybe. Forgiveness. But I was not offering that. Not yet. As he turned to leave, I added one more thing. He looked back. "This doesn't change the past. You may be working under me now, but don't mistake that for acceptance." He nodded slowly, then walked out. I sat back down, my heart pounding. Not with anger, but with a strange, calm clarity. This was not revenge. This was reclamation. But it was not over. Because I was not only planning to keep him close, I was going to show him, day by day, building by building, exactly what I had built, what he had dismissed, what he had tried to break, and what could never be taken from me again. I did not want an apology. I wanted him to see the truth and live with it every single day. He showed up on time that first Monday. Gray jacket, stiff posture, the folder I had given him tucked under his arm like a schoolboy's homework. Leia handed him the checklist, explained the system, and showed him how to scan the QR codes posted in each mechanical room and maintenance corridor to verify that he had completed his inspections. He did not say much that day. He just nodded, listened, and wrote everything down. It was strange seeing him like that, subdued, compliant, quiet. Not once did he comment on the office layout. Not once did he suggest improvements. The man who had once dominated every room with his presence now barely made a sound. But I knew him too well. That silence was not humility. It was shame. And the real revenge came slowly. Every building he was assigned to, every clipboard he carried, was a reminder that he did not own the empire. He was a part-time field tech on a probationary contract. He was no longer the voice at the head of the table. He was the man who reported to his son. The man who had once made a Thanksgiving toast mocking janitors was now, by every reasonable definition, doing janitor-level work himself, and under strict surveillance at that. The system I put in place left no room for excuses. Every entry point had a camera. Every QR scan recorded a timestamp. Every tenant could leave feedback. And I made sure his schedule included the very building he had once driven past and mocked. That dump downtown, he used to call it. That was the same building I had transformed into a co-working hub, now full of freelancer startups and 2 local newsrooms. Once a week, he had to check the boiler room there, wipe dust off the ceiling grates, and log airflow reports. I never humiliated him in public. I never raised my voice. I did not have to. I let silence speak. I let routine become the punishment. I let the new normal do the work. But the real fallout, the one that cracked his pride into pieces, came from the rest of the family. Because I did not stop at hiring him. I updated my will. I made a donation to the private school Leah's kids attended under my company's name. And I offered Mason's firm a property management contract for one of my satellite buildings on the outskirts of town. When the paperwork came in, he read the owner's name and called me immediately. "Wait," he said. "You own this place?" "Since last quarter," I replied. He paused. "Why? Why offer me the contract?" "Because I believe in giving people opportunities," I said, with a calm he could not argue with. "You're trying to make a point." "No," I said. "You made the point for me years ago. I'm just letting it echo." He did not respond after that. But over the next few months, word spread quietly and subtly. The family group chats grew quieter. The holidays became more awkward. Nobody toasted anything anymore. And at the next Thanksgiving, for the first time in more than a decade, I hosted dinner. I did not do it because I missed the noise, the rituals, or the empty compliments. I did it because I wanted to change the story. The table was long set with dark green napkins and gold-accented plates. Leia helped organize the caterer. A few of my close friends came with their families. Mason showed up alone. His wife had a thing. Leah arrived late, dragging her husband and kids behind her, eyeing the place like she was trying to measure it against her own life. Dad arrived last. He did not knock. He just stood outside until someone opened the door. When he walked in, I noticed something had changed. Not in his face, not in his voice. In the way he refused to look at anything. Not the chandelier, not the art, not the velvet curtains. It was like he had trained himself to avoid measuring, avoid reacting, avoid being seen, seeing. I let the room settle before I stood at the head of the table. Everyone turned toward me and I raised my glass. "To old roles," I said, "the ones we outgrow." A few people chuckled, some looked uncomfortable. Dad said nothing. I continued. "To new beginnings earned, not handed." Leah looked down at her plate. Mason cleared his throat. "To the people who build quietly," I added. "To the ones who were underestimated, dismissed, and ignored." Now the silence was thick. And to the ones who learn, sometimes too late, who the real builders were all along. I gently clinked my glass against the one in front of me, then took a sip. Nobody said a word. After dinner, while the others made polite conversation or hovered around the dessert table, Dad stepped out onto the back patio. I followed him. He did not look at me. "I don't know what you want from me," he said quietly. "I come to work. I don't complain. I stay out of your way." "I don't want anything," I replied. "Not from you." He looked down at his hands. They were shaking slightly. I had never seen them do that before. "I'm sorry," he said. Not loudly, not dramatically, not like something rehearsed. It was not even fully formed, but it was real. And I nodded. "Okay." We stood there for a while, just breathing in the cold air. He did not ask for more. I did not offer it. But when he came to work that Monday, he was 15 minutes early, and he stayed late. Months passed. Then a year passed. His contract ended, but I extended it with slightly better pay in the same role. He never asked for more. He never overstepped. Something in him had settled. Not submission exactly, just reality. And over time, the tension eased. We never became close. We never had long father-son talks or tried to play catch-up with the years we had lost. But one day, I saw him pause in the lobby of one of my buildings, look up at the company logo on the wall, and nod to himself. It was barely a gesture, but it was enough. He knew. And the final piece of revenge was that I no longer needed it. The power he had held over me for decades, his approval, his recognition, his validation, was gone. I had taken it back, not by force, but by becoming undeniable. My revenge was not in making him suffer, it was in making him see. And he did. Every single day. Until the end. And the last words he ever spoke to me were these: "You built something I couldn't even imagine."